please. Pretty please.
Chair, can I nominate someone who's on holiday at the moment? I'm standing in for him.
I don't know the rules on that. Yeah, you can. Okay.
I'd like to nominate Dennis Jones.
Dennis Jones. Okay. Could I have a seconder, please? Thank you very much, Councillor Barkham. Are there any other nominations? Okay. Are there any objections? In that case, then, in his absence, we hope Councillor Jones will be very pleased to know that he's been nominated, and I'm sure has accepted the position of Vice Chair. Thank you. Well, there's a moral in there, Councillor Beach, certainly. Okay, so I think my first duty really is to say thank you very much to Edward for all his hard work over the last 5 years of chairship and several years before that as a panel member. He's been an exceptional chair, and we're very grateful to all his help and support. Thank you. I think there are a lot of new faces around the table, so perhaps we'll start with a round of introductions, and we'll start with a familiar face, perhaps this side. Thank you.
Edward Lee, independent co-opted member.
Simon Barkham, Councillor for Peterborough.
Councillor Mohammed Jamil, Central Ward, Peterborough, standing in for your new Vice Chair, Dennis Jones.
Hi there, Jim Haylett, Chief Executive for the Police and Crime Commissioner.
Good afternoon, everybody. Darryl Preston, Police and Crime Commissioner for Peterborough and Cambridgeshire.
Hello, Christina Turner, Director for Strategic Partnerships.
Yeah, good afternoon, Jack Hudson, Director of Governance and Compliance.
Good afternoon, I'm Councillor Helen Leeming. I'm here from South Cambridgeshire District Council.
My name's Alan Sharp. I'm from East Cambs District Council, and can I just echo Claire's comments? I think I'm the oldest member on here, but echo Claire's comments about Edward in his term of office, certainly. Thank you.
Councillor John Going, I represent March Rural, Southern Rural.
I'm Lucy Foycebeard. I'm here from FDC in place of Susan today.
Hi, I'm Alice Gilderdale. I'm reserved for Cambridge City Council here in place of Baiju Tatala this week.
Rachel Edwards, Head of Constitutional Services for Peterborough City Council.
Jane Webb, support for the panel from Peterborough City Council.
And on the screen we have
Jason Murray, I'm here for Rochelle Tappins, Marketing Officer, Deputy Managing Officer.
Thank you very much. So we'll move on to item 3, apologies for absence. Jane, do we have some apologies?
That we do. We have councillors Dennis Jones, Stephen Ferguson, Susan Warlock, Baiju Varki, and its substitutes we have Councillor Mohammed Jamil, Lucy Foycebeard and Alice Gilderdale. Standing in for Councillor Dennis Jones, Susan Warlock and Baiju Varki. Councillor Anna Braddon's not here yet, but she's hoping to arrive shortly.
Thank you very much. We'll move on to item 4, declarations of interest. Does any member wish to declare any disclosable pecuniary interest or non-statutory disclosable interest? If so, could they please indicate by raising their hand? No. Okay, so no declarations, Jane. Okay. So we move on to item 5, then the minutes of the last meeting held on the 15th of March. Making an assumption panel members have had the opportunity to read the minutes. Are members happy to agree the minutes of the last meeting? Or do they require any amendments? No amendments. Are you happy then that they're signed as a true record of the meeting on the 15th of March? Yes. Thank you. You want me to write as well?
No, sign, autograph. Fabulous.
Okay, we move to item 6 then, review of actions and recommendations from the previous minutes. Commissioner, do you have anything that you wish to report back from the last meeting?
Thank you, Chair. Before I do, may I congratulate you on your new role and look forward to working with you and indeed the new members and existing members of this panel. Secondly, if I may add my voice in relation to Edward. He has been chair since I was elected 2.5 years ago. I have found him to be both very supportive and equally able to challenge, and we've been able to take that back. I see it as our collective role in keeping our communities safe, and Edward has played a significant part in doing so in Cambridgeshire and Peterborough. So I wish to extend my thank you to you. Chair, as is usual, although there were no formal actions, I think one recommendation from the last panel meeting, I did, however, endeavour to take some things away regarding some questions and come back and report back to the panel. So if I may, there were a number of questions raised. One was around when we mentioned our series of district days. This is where I will get out to each of the different areas across Cambridgeshire and Peterborough, meet with people, community events and businesses. And there was a requirement for advance notice, certainly to local councillors. We are doing that. And particularly for those new members, I'll be more than happy to make arrangements to come and see you in your patch, your ward, division, or whatever, to talk to you in the communities that you rightfully serve. The second one was a question around hard to reach communities and diversity within the various panels that we run as the OPCC. I can report back that the scrutiny panel has 25 volunteers, 11 of which are female, 14 males, and of these 8 identify as ethnic minority. So I think that's a reasonably good diversity split. In relation to the independent custody visitors, we have 29 of those, 11 females, 18 males. Of these, 26 identify as white British and 3 other. Less so for the ICVs. I think there are a number of reasons behind that. Pragmatically, it lends itself to people who are often, I'm sure they wouldn't mind me saying this, older, that have, have had their careers and now form this really vital role. It's something we have pushed hard. But again, quite often we find that with younger people, their commitment will only be for a short time as well. But we are certainly trying our hardest to recruit as a diverse a bunch of people as we possibly can. There was a question raised in relation to the ongoing vetting of police officers and staff. Members may be aware this became public news. The Home Secretary ordered that all police officers were run through the national databases. What I can report is that in relation to Cambridgeshire, this has now been completed. There have been no vetting issues identified. So that's really good news from a Cambridgeshire and Peterborough. I might just add that I was run through that one as well. So although it wasn't necessary as a police and crime police, as an elected official, I thought if the police officers and staff were, and my staff, then I too would. There was something around the culture statement. Colleagues will remember that the Chief Constable is rightly quite proud of this, as I am. The Constabulary is the first, if not the only, police force in the country to have a culture statement. As I've made clear before, words alone and the written document is not enough. It's how that's actually impacted in our frontline staff. And we've talked about that previously. What I can say, that has gone far and wide, and there has been certainly local media interest and indeed local radio interviews in that as well. So it's not just internal, it's put out there, and it's also being seen as best practice across the country. And I know the Chief Constable has been visited by many other police forces. There was a request to share the link to the Eastern Region Cyber Resilience Centre. We have done that. Those that don't have it, we will put it out again. This is really, really important, certainly with businesses. This is a free service, it's police run, and it offers really good prevention and protection advice around cyber security. There was a question around COVID. Have lessons been learnt? Well, there has been a number of things that have gone on within Constabulary, but more importantly, it's the Local Resilience Forum and their review as a collective multi-agency approach that is really the primary focus as opposed to just individual agencies, but there is work ongoing there. There was questions around Vision Zero partnership and the panel that were keen to scrutinise this. This is actually a multi-agency group. So rightly, I can't scrutinise it. I fund it, I support it, and I can scrutinise the police part of it. But you know, I think it would probably be improper for me to be able to bring something to you to scrutinise that in itself. But there is public documentation, and indeed, you know, if your role is from a local council or the county council, then of course there is that route in as well, because they are a statutory partner to that. There was one around the OPCC logo and the colouring. I think that came from Councillor Steve Count, who made reference. He liked blue, but it was too blue. I don't like the logo either. I inherited it. However, given that elections aren't that far away, I think it'd be wrong of me to spend public money on changing that and rebranding now. So we shall wait and see. But I too would prefer a different logo. And Domestic Abuse Perpetrator Fund, we mentioned that was about at the time, and that we had put a bid in. Really good news, due to the fantastic efforts of my team and partners across the local authority and third sector. We've successfully got £786,000. That's in addition to all those other funds that you'll be aware of as well. So I think that's really good news. So I think those are the sort of the soft actions from last time. So I don't have anything more to say on that.
Thank you very much. We'll move then to item number 7, public questions. Jane, have we received any public questions?
None that can be asked today, so no.
Okay, thank you very much. Right, we'll move to item number 8 then, public complaints against the Police and Crime Commissioner for the year 2022-23. Jane, do we have any complaints within that time frame?
During the year 22-23, no public complaints were received that met the criteria for recording concerning the Commissioner.
Thank you. And our panel happy to note the report? Yes, sir. Thank you. Councillor Barkham.
Happy to note, but what is the criteria?
Would you like to answer that?
It has to reach a certain, or we haven't actually had any in to reach a certain level of any complaints that have actually come in to go to be recorded or go to the IOPC. So
Haven't had any? That's not the criteria, though,
yeah.
is it then?
There has to be not within. They have to be less than 12 months old, and criteria like that. There's a list that you have to go through that they have to be met, and they have to be against the Commissioner and not against his staff, and just general. Jim's putting his hand up. He probably can explain it a lot better than I can.
Would you like to do that for us, please?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, there's a specific regulation, which is secondary legislation on the back of the other police complaint system, that is solely dedicated to police and crime commissioners in terms of the criteria. And essentially it falls into what would be called conduct matter. So as an example, if I identified that the Commissioner was breaching appropriate standards of conduct, I could flag that to the panel for recording as a conduct issue, or alternatively members of the public, if they feel that there is a conduct issue. So if the Commissioner said something, you know, grossly inappropriate on a media interview or anywhere really, or was suspected of committing a criminal offence, then again, that would, you know, be something that would fit the criteria of serious complaint. In the case of serious complaints that are defined as criminal allegations, they then would be referred to the Independent Office of Police Conduct. As with all complaint system, you know, there is a sort of de minimis threshold that has to be reached, otherwise they would completely be bogged down. So quite often, I mean, I see this in the OPCC world because we deal with complaints against the Chief Constable, but only complaints against the Chief Constable. Quite often people who are dissatisfied with other members of the constabulary then submit a complaint against the Chief Constable because he's essentially vicariously liable. That doesn't fit the criteria for recording. And similarly, in the OPCC world, there's similar criteria. So any complaints against me or my staff within the OPCC, whilst the Commissioner, it's the Commissioner's office, it has to be the personal conduct of the Commissioner that is complained of, as opposed to what I or any of my staff have done. And of course, you know, people are quite often upset. They want to complain. And we try and direct them to the appropriate route for that complaint to be properly handled, because it's hugely prescriptive in the police world, as you might imagine.
Thank you very much for that very comprehensive response. Is the panel happy to note the report? Sorry.
Chair.
Yes, of course.
I think it's helpful for members, Jane, I think just to clarify the time period that we're looking at in terms of the complaints, so that we're clear as to the time period that's referenced. I think that'd be quite helpful.
Yeah, this report is based on the last year, but we used to do these at every meeting. Now, when the complaint policy was looked at, it was decided that we'd do it yearly. So this is from April to April, the municipal year. So we're looking at past when up until April.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, so we'll move to item 9, the Police and Crime Commissioner's annual report. Commissioner, would you like to present this item?
Thank you, Chair. So colleagues, you would have had the report in advance, and we've followed the same sort of format as I did last year, and I'm grateful it was gratefully received last year. We've gone for accessibility, and I say we because that's why my team are here today. A lot of effort and time has been put in by my team. But the primary focus was to keep this as accessible to the point. There are other reports that one might find out there that are much longer with a lot more detail, but that detail is available elsewhere. I want people to be able to read this, and hopefully we've hit the mark on a number of factors. If I may, Chair, just pull out some highlights from the reports. The first one is around more police officers. We will all be aware of the government uplift. What I can report in Cambridgeshire Constabulary, thanks to the Chief Constable and his team, not only did we meet our national uplift numbers, but we exceeded and we attracted additional money from government to do that as well. So we now have a record 1,732 warranted police officers across the county. The issue, of course, is that we need to retain those officers. I'm not talking about retention in that those that want to leave, but obviously to retain those numbers, there is an ongoing significant recruitment campaign. In fact, in the time frame of this uplift over the past 3 years, the constabulary has actually recruited over 500 additional police officers. I'm also pleased to report the diversity mix there as well. 44% of those recruits were women. In fact, I was at a passing out parade just recently, I think 25 of which 19, this was a accelerated detective course, 19 were women, which, you know, when I go back to when I joined the police, that's a significant improvement as to where we were. Neighbourhood crime, panel members no doubt will be aware, neighbourhood crime is a government priority. And when we talk about neighbourhood crime, we're talking about those crimes such as domestic household burglary, particularly abhorrent crime, robbery, vehicle crime, and those sort of crime types. But what I can report is that we've seen a 30% decrease in all of those, and that's baselined against 2019. This isn't cooking of figures. This is about pre-COVID, because COVID skewed figures incredibly. And then, of course, out of COVID, we saw them jump again. Of course, we would expect that to happen. So we've gone back to the 2019 baseline. When we talk about other crimes as well across the county, I mean, I also want to talk about those things that actually matter to a lot of people in our local communities. I'll give one example, bike crime. When I was elected to this role, it was quite clear to me that there was a significant social media campaign in Cambridge around bike crime and a perception, or indeed the reality, of a lack of police involvement in tackling those sort of crimes. What I can report is that in relation to bike crime, Cambridge City has seen a 60% decrease in reported bike thefts, and across the county it's 49% down. Now, bike crime might not be the most significant harmful crime, but it matters to communities when they don't see the police taking action on crime. So I'm particularly pleased that we've seen some improvements there. And that goes for rural crime as well. We will all be aware that most of our county is rural. Our rural communities often find that they feel isolated and perhaps don't get the service that others do. And in the report, you will see some really significant decreases in rural crime, particularly the crime of hair coursing. It may not impact many of us in our cities and other places across the country, but it significantly impacts our rural communities. Any of you that represent a rural community, I don't need to tell you the significant impact that has. Community safety, up to £730,000 have been invested in community safety partnerships. So the panel, we presented on this before. I'm really pleased and proud of this. I think we're really moving in the right direction. It's early days, 2.5 years, but I'm getting some really good feedback. I was with East Cambridgeshire CSP recently, Fenland, South Cambs, Peterborough are doing some great work. Huntingdonshire, we need to do a bit more work there as well, but I'm speaking to local councillors to drive that forward. But there's been some fantastic projects which I visited, which they are supporting. In addition, there is a national review around community safety partnerships. I've said before, their performance across the country is variable. And we've been taken, and I will look around, I'll be stopped if I don't, but we've been taken as some good practice for that review. So that's really good to see. Crime prevention, the Safer Streets funding, that's enabled recruitment of 2 additional antisocial behaviour coordinators for Peterborough and Fenland. And training has also been delivered to over 150 people from various different agencies to deliver a more consistent approach to problem solving. And I've witnessed some of this close hand. Operation Luscombe, for example, is around dealing with homelessness, drug addiction. I attended a couple of their meetings. It's so impressive to see the different agencies working together and the data and information sharing, which is often the biggest block, but they're around the table actually discussing real life cases in real time and making a real difference. Youth Fund, I'm particularly proud of this because the panel, those that have known me for some time now, that early intervention in young people is really, really important to me. And on the district days, I will always go into a school or two. So far, well, this year, I think it was 35 projects were granted, just under a total amount of £100,000. And some may say, well, actually, we want this money spent on the police. But remember, a lot of this money is taken from proceeds of crime and other pots like that and put back into communities. So of those funds, and those that aren't aware of the Youth Fund, because as councillors, you're in a great place to identify local projects. We can certainly put that out again. But there's been some fantastic local projects. It's small pots of money, but what I can report as well is across the county, every district, every area has received something, and it's something that I really, really want to continue with moving forward. Road safety, we've mentioned Vision Zero partnership. I continue to support that partnership and the constabulary, particularly the special constabulary, and we bought them some equipment for enforcement. We all know it's not about enforcement, although many of our residents want to see the police enforcing, quite rightly. We need to really tackle more around the prevention area. I mentioned protecting rural communities. What we have seen is that hair coursing, I mentioned, it's actually 48% down, and Cambridgeshire and its partners are seen as sort of national leaders in tackling hair coursing. We will take dogs off criminals. And now with new legislation, we have just seen in Lincolnshire a very significant sentence passed, whereas before people were getting £10 fines because it was very old legislation that was being used. Fighting serious crime, there is some information in there. Clearly that's for the police and other agencies, and indeed when we talk about some of those other programs that are being run by government. But there's been some really good success, particularly around county lines. The Constabulary recently working with the Metropolitan Police has some substantial drugs busts, which is good news and we want to see. And of course, putting the people of Cambridgeshire and Peterborough first, listening to local residents. I made the example earlier of bike crime. I'm not going to harp on that, but that was a significant issue to Cambridge because, and across the county, Cambridge was the national centre for bike crime. It's now out of the top 3, I think, which is good news. But that's about dealing with local issues, not just all the big issues. Supporting victims and witnesses. So I've invested around 4.4 million in victim services. We've had over 11,000 victims which have been supported across Cambridgeshire. Our victims hub, I think, is a really good model. Although it's really difficult to analyse how good a job they're doing, we have been visited, I'm informed, by many other police forces around the country to look at what we are doing. So that in itself tells us something. And what I'm particularly pleased with when we talk about victims, this isn't, this isn't restricted to any type of crime. There are services and pathways for victims of all types of crime. And panel members will be aware I'm particularly passionate around the violence against women and girls agenda, having worked in child protection, having worked in serious sexual offences. And there's some fantastic work being done there with significant investment for the independent sexual violence advisors and domestic violence advisors as well. So, I mean, altogether, I say that I'm particularly pleased. I thank my team as well. They do a fantastic job. I'm often asked, well, how much do they cost you? It's public knowledge how much the team cost. I do always point out that if they weren't there, the constabulary and others would be doing this job. So this isn't a new cost. It's a cost that's always been there. In fact, it's much leaner. But I'd also point out, that's £1.8 million of investment was brought in during the reporting period. That is more than what my office costs. And looking to next year, I believe, we'll be looking at some significant investment due to the excellent bids and the excellent work across the county into government. Chair, that's a brief summary of my report. I'm very happy to take any questions that panel members may have.
Thank you very much, Commissioner. Do we have any questions from the panel members? Councillor Barkham.
Thank you, Chair. I have a few. Can I ask a few or?
Yes, just one at a time.
Thank you. Hi, thank you, Darryl. Appreciate your report there. Really informative and interesting. Just briefly, on the previous meeting, there were some questions put forward that you didn't come back on. I wanted to mention them because it does relate to the report on the communication. Councillor Hogg asked a question about the live web chat. He said that the logo could be improved. Was anything done on that? I don't know if you want to come back to my questions individually or at the end, wherever would work better for you. I've only got 3 more questions. The other one is, you mentioned hare coursing, but as you know, fox hunting still exists, and I've been to some events where police officers have shared their concerns that there's obviously loopholes still exist. Trail hunting is something people disguise fox hunting as, but that in turn causes lots of landowners, rural residents, problems with hounds running across their land and then chased by horses. And in turn, we had something last year where the dogs ran onto the roads and got run over in the A47, if you remember that scenario. What's been done about that element of issues. Finally, it was on the prisons. I can't see or what has been done actually. It's a tricky scenario. The previous deputy police and crime commissioner was speaking to about how females in prison are vulnerable to be exploited in prison, and then on their release, they come out addicted, could one say? And then in turn exploited, so being coerced during prison, and then come out, they're still captive. What are we doing to help those? Can it be identified in the prison? Can we help them once they come out? Because that's a slippery slope. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Chair. Some really good questions. The first one, I do have a response. I missed it when I talked about the soft actions, the web chat. It's a national system, and anyone, I've been in this world before with IT, to change national systems. We can feed back. To be honest, I know Councillor Hogg is quite passionate about this, but we haven't had any other complaints, but we can certainly feed that one back. It's not lost. You make a very good point around fox hunting. I'll be quite clear. You know, the law is the law, and I would expect the Chief Constable to enforce the law. Hunting with dogs, I know there's certain caveats, etc., is against the law. I'm aware of what you're talking about here, where you know some may try and circumnavigate the law. We have the best rural crime team in the country. They are very much aware of the legislation, and if any reports are received by the constabulary, I would expect the Chief Constable to investigate or indeed deal with any acts of criminality. So I'm quite clear on that. Prisons, and particularly women in prisons. I've visited Peterborough Prison now 3 or 4 times, and it wasn't lost on me. It was quite moving, actually. I was speaking to the prison governor. They're not actually called a governor, they're a director there because it's privately run, who pointed out to me that most women in prison are indeed victims of far more serious crimes than they're actually in prison for. We've certainly done some work with the prison. We did something with Peterborough United, actually, some work around giving coaching qualifications to women prisoners. There is, firstly, I don't hold the prison to account. What I do, though, is chair the local criminal justice board, which the prisons are part of, along with probation service. I know one of the issues, I hear this quite often, is short sentences. So how much work can be done in prisons is actually, you know, quite challenging, I think, to the service. It's something I'm passionate about. Christina, is there anything you want to add? Because I know that Christina was policy lead in this area, works very closely with probation and the prison service. But there is a lot going on, but I still think we need to do more.
Yes, thanks, Commissioner. I think I would just add that the prison do have a females lead there who's very active in this area and working across a number of areas. And also I'm aware that there is work going on with the prison working with local partners and that kind of continuity of pathways between the prison and the community.
If I may just add, the other thing that won't be lost on any of us, and when you talk to the prison governors, probation, etc., anybody leaving prison, and of course we should be concentrating because the risk of reoffending is significant, you know, so, you know, this is for our community's benefit as well as for those individuals. But what we do need to ensure that when people leaving prison, you know, there's a couple of things which are a requisite to enable them to stop offending. One is somewhere to live. And then the next bit is around jobs and skills. And I think there's a bit more work, and I'll be talking to colleagues in the combined authority around the jobs and skills part, because that's part of devolved power as well. And I know there's lots of people that are very keen to. Also, just on another matter, I think, I forget the name now, but in Peterborough you have it's actually run by the prison, but an outreach centre. And when I went there, it was actually staffed and resourced by ex-prisoners and women prisoners as well. So this is about jobs, opportunities, etc. And we do need to be doing more than that, not just here in Cambridgeshire and Peterborough, but nationally.
Edward.
Thank you, Chair. So, Commissioner, I'm pleased to see that your report is short, as you promised, and it's well structured and fact filled, which is great. I do have a general observation that some of the facts in there are so. You would stress to us that, you know, the Chief Constable's operational independence, and there are things in there which are clearly the work of the Chief Constable, or they were led by the Chief Constable and possibly originated by the Chief Constable. So I do feel it's quite important in here to attribute credit where it's due, both so that the Chief Constable does get credit where it's due, but also so that the public is clear about where your powers lie and where the Chief Constable's powers lie, and that's particularly in, say, the robust enforcement section. I think there could be a sort of a misunderstanding about what your role and influence is in that area. And I think it would be helpful if, where you have had an active role, that's what you report here, and that perhaps some of these sort of achievements that you've reported here perhaps need to go into a separate section like the national policing priorities, so that they're clearly the outputs of, I mean, obviously it's a collective exercise, but they're the outputs of policing, and that you're reporting your role in helping to achieve those rather than perhaps seeming to take credit for them. But more onto specific things, on the Vision Zero. Vision Zero has been around a long time, and obviously you've explained that this is a partnership effort, but it does feel that it's under-delivering, and I'm not sure whether the partnership is therefore can be said to be functioning effectively. I did a quick analysis of the last 10 years statistics on deaths, and even controlled for population increase, they are at best flat over those 10 years. KSIs have declined slightly, but that's probably more explained by increased safety of vehicles, at least for the occupants of vehicles. So I think there does kind of need to be somebody needs to take a lead on kind of rebooting, I think, the Vision Zero to make sure that it has clear objectives and a clear governance structure to achieve them. And at the moment, it doesn't feel like it does. I think the statistics that you cite on the support provided by the Cambridgeshire and Peterborough Rape Crisis Partnership are horrifying in the size of the numbers. To realise that they're supporting 1,497 adults and 385 young survivors of rape and sexual abuse. That seems to be something that, to my mind, needs to be shouted loud. I just don't think the general population understands how big that problem is. And obviously, we're very thankful to the Commissioner's support of Rape Crisis. Was at one point that support was in danger of being withdrawn in Cambridge because of lack of funding. So, I'm very pleased to see that has been able to continue that level of support. But I do find it horrifying that it is having to provide such a high level of support or support for such a large number of people. You provide a link in the report to the HMI report, which is actually the 2020-2021 report. That's where the link goes to, which is the most recent comprehensive report. You may just want to check on that link, but the report that it lands on is the one that states that there are 2 areas requiring improvement and one that's inadequate. So I think if you were to link to that, then there needs to be a commentary on kind of what has changed and what has, how that report has been responded to. I think that's probably all my comments on this this particular report. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for those observations. In relation to the credit, you're absolutely right. I'd go further. It's not just the Chief Constable. It's the men and women of Cambridgeshire Constabulary who are responsible for this under the direct leadership of the Chief Constable, supported by the Office of the Police and Crime Commission. Just on that as well, obviously, the Police and Crime Plan, which is my police and crime plan, is something that the Chief Constable has to take account of. So those areas I've been very careful to ensure that they're the police and crime plan, and they are there. But I take your point entirely. It's not me going out and arresting burglars. It's the great men and women of the constabulary. Vision Zero. Look, I can't disagree with you. Actually, if I have a nervousness, it's around the name. We would all want an aspiration for our roads to be safe, that we have no serious injuries or fatalities. How achievable that is, I'm not sure. I think technology was actually going to be the big game changer when it comes to this, because ultimately the number one reason for road traffic collisions it is around poor driving. It's not say speeding, it's around people not abiding by the rules and taking care behind the wheel. I will be looking at this, and my team are aware as well, because we are still not seeing a drop in fatalities on our roads across Cambridgeshire and Peterborough, and that's something we really need to address, because it is quite shocking. I'm glad you raised this issue around the sexual offences and the support given there. As I mentioned earlier, this was an area of policing that I specialised in. And I've often been asked, why is it so much worse today than it ever was? I don't think it is. I think what we are seeing is people more confident to come forward and report. And that's certainly my professional judgment. In many ways, I suspect it was far worse at one stage, particularly when we talk about historical child abuse and some of the cases that I dealt with. But it's good to know that we have gateways and support services. And as Police and Crime Commissioner, that will always be a top priority for me. It's something I am passionate about, particularly our young people and that violence against women and girls agenda. And we'll take away the issue about the link to the HMICFRS. I'm not aware, so we'll have a look at that. But thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. Councillor Jamil.
Thank you, Chair, and through you. Darryl, I'm heartened to know that the numbers of police officers are growing. And we're at a number, as you say, it's a record number as at March 2023. One of the biggest bugbears that, as a councillor, and I'm sure it's shared as well, is that when we try and sell that to the public, they say, well, we don't see them. And that is got to change. If we are getting more people, we need to put more people back on the street. What are you doing with the Chief Constable in order to ensure that happens? One of the other ones that I find frustrating is that we have a regular meeting with police officers who represent the part of Peterborough that I represent. However, I don't seem to be able to get the same police officer twice. So you may be setting something, and it's very frustrating because you give your problems, and then what you find out the next meeting that they've moved on, and then there is something else, and that continuity is getting really frustrating because we cannot then feed back to our constituents, or what they say is, oh well, it was passed on, but we've done nothing. That how we do, or what we're going to do to change that.
So you would not be surprised to hear that I often get asked that by residents and councillors alike as well. Firstly, going back to Edward's point, I mean, it's for the Chief Constable to deploy their officers and staff, and quite rightly. So I can't say, Chief Constable, I want another 10 police officers in your ward tomorrow. That would be completely improper and in fact probably unlawful as well. So what is happening? Firstly, let's be really clear. This is a lot of new police officers who are young in service, and it's going to take some time before we see the impact. I know that from my professional experience. It takes a while. They are in training. This has happened in the last 3 years. What you're talking about is that specific local sort of contact. The interesting thing for me is when we say we want to see more police. I get that. So do I. I mean, we're all feel reassured and have confidence when we see that. But I think from my perspective, what I want to see is the police doing a good job, preventing crime and then detecting crime. And this comes back to, quite often if we see lots of police around our local area, it's because probably we don't want to see the police. There's something going on. But I do take the point, visibility is important to our residents. But my focus is obviously on those more police officers. The Chief Constable has made commitment to local neighbourhood policing in bolstering those teams as well. And in relation to that contact and having the same, what we are seeing with our neighbourhood policing teams now, we're different from my day, there is a lot more continuity there. A lot of police officers actually want to join those teams. They are good places to work. So I think we will see improvements, notwithstanding that. Like any other service, and particularly in public sector, there is so much resource and there is so much to do. You would have seen in the report as well, demand on policing is up. For those that attended the headquarters recently and visited our control room and demand hub, there's been a significant increase in calls of service into policing. So these are all things that the Chief Constable will have to balance. But the only other thing I would say, I talked about the community safety partnerships. As councillors, I think that you've got a really important role there. There's local authority that actually in the scrutiny panel holds them to account. I had paid for posts in every area. Peterborough, we didn't put a post in there because they had that in place already. So I would encourage you to speak to the community. So it's a Safer Peterborough partnership, because that is where all the agencies are together and policing is there. You have direct voice. I would really encourage that going forward.
Thank you, Commissioner. Any further questions? Any other panel members? Councillor Sharp.
Thank you, Chair. I've got 3 questions or points, and I'll go through them one by one. You mentioned tackling bike theft, and that's great, looking at the figures. I just wondered if that, and it may be a combination, whether it's better detection, better advice to people to protect the bike, and also hopefully, and you may not be able to comment, or that we've got some of the perpetrators out of the way, so to speak. They've been put in prison, so they're not able to perpetrate the theft. The second one is on page 29 in terms of tackling knife crime, which obviously is great. I just wondered if there's stats around that, whether the number of incidents have gone down and maybe the number of convictions. And the third point, which I wasn't really going to mention, but it touches on what Edward Lee raised, is in terms of Vision Zero. And I mean, my patch is a very rural community. I've got all the villages, for benefit of other members, I've got all the villages south of Newmarket. They're in Cambridgeshire, so right in the southeast. Very rural community. And I've got one particular road where we've got, I think, 17 houses that have been there for a long time. It's a 60-mile-an-hour straight road. There have been, fortunately, not recently, but there have been fatalities there, although some of those are on the Suffolk border, because it's right on that border. And I'm dealing with the county, obviously, county council as well. It's how we get that mentality, for want of a better word, through to drivers, that the 60-mile-an-hour limit, which it is along there, is not the minimum, or because unfortunately they do drive along there a lot faster than that. And I know we have probably twice a year we get a police speed van will come out and do some checks along there, but it's how we, and I know probably none of us probably have all the answers, but it's how we get that across to drivers that particular road, and I'm sure there's others around the county, are really dangerous if people use excess speed.
So if I mean, in relation to your last point, I agree. If people didn't drive dangerously, we would not be seeing these. And how do we stop that? Well, I mean, there's education, there's enforcement, there's other preventive measures, and there's technology. I don't think anyone's found the magic wanders yet, because we're not isolated. We do have some fast roads here in Cambridgeshire which lend themselves sometimes to not being the safest, but ultimately it is still people not driving safely, or they're a victim of somebody else who's driving unsafely, and that's the worst thing about this. But it's an area I'll continue to be heavily involved in. There are a number of programs like the Community Speed Watch, which I've mentioned, the Special Constabulary who do enforcement. But it's a partnership. Roads I can't control, even cameras I can't control. That's not something I can do. But we do need to look at this, and certainly, myself and the team have been busy, but I do want to focus on this a little bit more if I can. I know the answer to why bike crime's down. I won't give all of it away because I don't want the criminals to know. But I do know that the constabulary, not me, I didn't ask, I talked about local issues, local priorities, that they took it to task and did something about it. You will see everywhere else in the country that I looked, it's going up still. Whereas Cambridgeshire is one of the very few where it's going down, and they've been invited to the National Cycle Crime Steering Group to tell everybody how to do it. So that's good. Knife crime and stats. So I won't quote any of the most recent, but the reality is about this is that knife crime and serious violence has gone up. across the country over the past 10, 15 years, whereas every other crime type, or most crime, has come down significantly in the past 10, 15 years. We have seen a spike in serious violence and knife crime. A lot of this is attributable to county lines and drug dealing. Now, drug dealers have always been around, but we are seeing a particularly violent and nasty methodology behind it now. And hence we have, county lines and knife crime. This is why the government introduced a serious violence strategy. We now have new legislation. There is a duty for all agencies to cooperate in reducing serious violence. We have received some funding from government, not a significant amount, but I will take anything. And I am, for want of a better word, the senior responsible person in the county for it, because I chair our High Harms Board, which I set up, serious violence being part of that. And we recently ran a serious violence workshop, a reduction. Once again, no magic wand, no golden nugget. I was actually the senior policy lead in my previous job at the Association of Police Crime Commissioners. So I have seen some of the world's greatest experts on this talk, from Glasgow, Cardiff, Chicago, all about the models and what's been done there. So there's lots we know that does work. We need to localise that here in Cambridgeshire and Peterborough. For me, it's that early intervention piece again. How do we make our young people realise and recognise that it is better not to go down a path of criminality in county lines and those sort of things? How do we make it more appealing that they don't? I think we certainly, the constabulary now and others, the schools programmes are getting better. And I'm getting lots of direct feedback from head teachers now that they feel better supported in this area. Because I think young people are the key. And the facts will show us that it is young people who are A, most likely to be a victim, and B, most likely to be the perpetrator of these wicked crimes. So I wouldn't say early days, because we've been on this for a long time, but now with this new legislation, the new strategy, which has been developed county-wide as well, we're hoping to see a lot more focus go into this area. I would be clear though, this is a public meeting. In Cambridgeshire and Peterborough, we do not see the same levels of violence that many other parts of our country do. Generally speaking, we are safe, but any one of these types of crimes has such a massive impact on our communities, the individual, the family, and wider, that we need to be doing everything we can. And some of it is quite simple. So it's just so easy to get hold of a knife. And we still find that machetes and they're perfectly legal to buy. Obviously, if you're under 18, you're not allowed to. But once again, you go online and you can buy. So there is some stuff that can be done around the edges. But for me, early intervention and dealing with that young people, that education piece is really important.
Thank you, Commissioner. Any further questions? Okay. In which case, if there are no further questions, I'm going to ask the panel then, are you happy to receive and note the report? Yes? Yes. Thank you. Okay, we'll move on to item number 10 then, Police and Crime Commissioner's approach to integrity assurance. Commissioner, would you like to present this report?
Thank you, Chair. So the panel will no doubt be aware, colleagues, that ethical policing forms a strand of the Police and Crime Plan. And this actually went into the Police and Crime Plan before some of that high-level media cases that we saw, particularly in the Metropolitan Police. There is a lot of work going on in this area in relation to the integrity and the assurance that I seek. So there are a number of areas that the report highlights, arrangements at the constabulary across the collaboration as well, with Bedfordshire, Cambridge and Hertfordshire, that I'm responsible for and I have oversight of, where the ethics and integrity are reported and scrutinised, and now they're considered as well. This is one example of how the Chief Constable ensures the workforce acts with integrity. So we have those scrutiny panels within that BCH environment. I've considered myself, particularly around the integrity assurance, around the use of ethical scrutiny. Well, I've mentioned earlier that we have the scrutiny panels. Most of those ethical and insurance issues are generally with the Chief Constable. So I think that we've already got those in place there. Apologies, I've just gone wrong on my report here as well. But you've had the report, and I'm very happy to take any questions with my team on anything that you may wish to raise.
Thank you very much, Commissioner. Are there any questions? Edward.
Thank you, Chair. I think this report gives a very good view of the landscape of the scrutiny and regulation, which is reassuring. There is, in my mind, a notable gap which actually relates around the public's contact and the feedback from the police, which is, as you know, a recurring theme of dissatisfaction both amongst the public and from the panel. And I just wondered why there isn't something specifically set up to monitor that, learn from that, and feedback in a way that's reported to you at least, or whether that actually does exist and it's just not in this report because this is about integrity and that's not an integrity matter. But it just seems to be it's an area that is has long been of concern, and it seems to be, as I say, it seems to be a gap in this.
So I think it's not in here because I'm not sure that is around the integrity in insurance, but it's something I absolutely recognise. I mean, I speak to lots of people up and down the county, and often I am informed that that we keep telling the police, we keep reporting this to the police, and we never hear anything is done. That's a common criticism. I know as councillors you will hear that quite often as well. I know that there is a counter argument. Quite often there's lots of good work by the police where people are kept informed as well. Ultimately, it's an operational matter how that happens, but certainly it's conversations I've had with the Chief Constable and will continue to have, because when it comes to public confidence in policing, I think it's really important. I think we are seeing improvements in relation to our bolstered local neighbourhood policing teams. I am certainly getting more feedback now, even direct feedback, that things seem better because of those embedded local policing teams. But it's certainly something that I will continue to hold the Chief Constable to account. The only other plea I do make, because I quite often get told, well, we don't hear back, etc. The plea I would make to you in your roles as local leaders is do encourage our residents to report. And one of the reasons is not just so that the police can get all that information and do something with it, and they will, the local policing teams, they will prioritise based on what's coming to them. The other thing is it's really useful to me because I can then hold the Chief Constable to account. The amount of times I will go to a parish council or a community event and get told, and I won't mention any names or any villages, towns or cities, but we've got this real big problem round here and the police are doing nothing about it. I will go back, we will go to the constabulary and say, been told there's this big problem, please do nothing about it. And then I get, well, Commissioner, we've had 2 calls in the past 6 months. We need that information so A, the police can deal with it, and B, I can hold the police to account. And I'd very much like your help in making that happen as well.
Thank you, Commissioner. Are there any further questions? Councillor Barkham.
Hi. I brought this up actually last Friday at the one-on-one meeting. It's about managing expectation when people report something and what feedback should they get back. And one of the easy ways to solve it would just be clearly an automated response potentially to say thank you very much for the information. If it's something ongoing, we can't come back to you. But if it is, we will. Oh, great, thanks. Now I know. Now I'm not left in the dark. It's simple that. It's communication. That's all it needs. A lot of people say, I don't hear anything. And that's because they wasn't told they wasn't going to hear anything because it might have been ongoing. At least if they're made aware of it, they've got nothing to complain about.
So, okay, I don't disagree with you at all. I think it's really important. I mean, there's always going to be a resource implication. The more to do, the more it costs. But I think it's a good investment. I would just slight caution is that I know that there is lots of good feedback that goes on as well. You know, if you're a victim of crime, there's always going to be occasions when it doesn't work as it should do, and we need to be dealing with that. But I completely agree with you. I think that feedback is really important in keeping that confidence in policing.
Thank you. Any further questions? Okay, if there are no further questions, then are the panel happy to note this report? So no further questions and no objections. Panel will note the report. Thank you very much. Okay, we'll now move to agenda item number 11, delivery of the Policing Crime Commissioner's Policing Crime Plan and the progress report. Commissioner, would you like to introduce and present this item?
Thank you, Chair. And obviously the panel has the report. And I think a lot of what is in there we've already gone through today in one way, shape, form or another. Just to pull out a couple of areas. Putting communities first, I've talked about the CSPs, the community safety partnerships. For me, this is, we actually did a 3-year investment in relation to posts, knowing full well how difficult it is to retain and recruit people on 1 year. So that's long-term investment, which I shall continue. In relation to other areas such as crime prevention activities of note, the Constabulary have launched a new prevention and vulnerability hub. I've often noted that when you look across policing and law enforcement, there are lots going on in relation to, do I need to take a moment or? No. There's lots going on in relation to many national issues. When you ask policing and law enforcement, what about prevention? It used to be, well, it's the golden thread going for everything. It's the golden thread going for everything. Well, actually, I think it needs to be more than that. The sign of successful policing is actually no crime prevention. So I'm really pleased that the Constabulary have launched this new initiative. Other work is that we have the Harm to Hope drug strategy. So this is the government strategy in relation to dealing with drugs addiction, demand and enforcement. I am unusually, as Police and Crime Commissioner, the senior responsible officer across the county for the implementation of this strategy. I say unusually because it's normally other, like Director of Public Health or someone, but it's an area that I'm passionate about. And so I've committed time and effort. And actually, what I did say, if I'm going to be the responsible officer, I'm not just coming to the strategic meeting. I want to know what's happening. And Christina, who supports me, I'll probably get involved in weeds a little bit too much there, but it's quite interesting when you look at addiction and demand, what we're doing across the county. What I can report, actually, we're doing some pretty good stuff compared to other areas. And that's because we've got some fantastic people working in Peterborough, in Cambridgeshire, particularly on the front line. I talked about the youth fund. As I say, that's still ongoing, and where I can, I intend to maintain that because there's doing some fantastic stuff. And I've also talked about the serious violence duty, which dealing with serious violence is not new, but we have a new emphasis, and particularly in the High Harms Board, which I chair. And I'm not sure I've mentioned as yet, the High Harms Board, which is now up and running. I'm feeling that we're moving forward with this. It used to be a much bigger, wider board before my day that dealt with 13, 14, 15 different areas. That's just not manageable. So we drill down now to 4 areas, which is serious violence. It's around the drugs. It's around violence against women and girls and serious and organised crime. It won't be lost on colleagues that actually most of them are the same thing, probably with the exception of violence against women and girls, but some of that is as well. So a real focus strategically across the county. And lastly, supporting victims and witnesses. There's lots going on. You've seen that in the paper already that will always be a top priority for me, and that will always receive significant investment. And I just want to say thank you once again to my team, and this talks about the value of the Office of the Police and Crime Commissioner, because they, for want of a better word, run the victim services across the county with just a couple of people involved, and I think they do a fantastic job.
Thank you very much, Commissioner. Are there any panel member questions? Councillor Gilderdale.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks for the report. I just had a couple of questions on two separate things. So the first one was about your priority around putting communities first. And I know it's mentioned a few times in the priority itself about hate crime. And I wondered if it'd be possible to have a bit more information on the work that you're doing around hate crime and preventing hate crime, and whether there's more that can be done. I know that recently there was the launch of the Stop Hate campaign in Cambridgeshire, and I think work like that we should really be promoting and supporting. So I wondered if that's something that you're going to be working with. And my second question was around, I guess it kind of links into the work on the Vision Zero partnership, and about what we can be doing for non-car related road users and road safety. So I know that we've all seen the huge increase in electric bikes, electric scooters, mopeds, and in Cambridge we recently had the really tragic death of a family as a result of the lithium battery charging. And I wonder if there's more that we can be doing both to promote safety of these vehicles and batteries, battery charging, but also what we can be doing to encourage government to kind of roll out legislation in this area, because at the moment it's quite a grey area, and it makes it very difficult for authorities to be legislating and making sure that people are using these vehicles safely. So thank you.
So I'll take the last one first, and you make a very, very valid point. It's about road safety, and that means everybody who uses our roads, and indeed that's the Vision Zero. I mean the e-scooter issue, and you know, firstly the tragic events in Cambridge. It was good to see the fire service very, very swiftly. I have children at school, and I got the email from the school, from the fire service, warning. And you don't normally see that, but they obviously considered it to be such a significant risk, and it's good to see they did that. And it's horrific. My thoughts are with the family, the community, fire ambulance and police officers who dealt with that awful scene. So you're absolutely right. I mean, road safety is across all those aspects. We are looking at new legislation soon in relation to e-scooters. You know, ultimately, people will often come to me and say, "What are the police doing about it?" Well, you know, once again, the police can't arrest their way out of this e-scooter problem when you can go down into any high store or online and just buy one. You know, to expect the police then. So there needs to be a multi-agency and well thought through approach as to how we actually deal with that. Hate crime. And when we talk about hate crime, let's be clear, because actually there's no crime that's a hate crime. It's the hate which is part of a crime. It's where people will apply, you know, those different forms of criminality based on, you know, a number of protected characteristics. Hate crime is an absolute priority, and I'll use that phrase because you did, Councillor. It is a priority for policing. For the constabulary, they have a department, they have a team that look very closely at this. From my perspective, you know, it will always be a priority dealing with those sorts of crimes. And myself, I'll give you one example. You know, for example, here in Peterborough, I attend and a member of the Joint Mosque Group, because that's really important that we get to know all of our communities. I do spend quite a lot of time in the various communities in Cambridge, the Chinese community, and those awful attacks we had in Mill Road. I certainly intervened there, not operationally, but I did speak to the Chief Constable to ask for updates regularly. So, but hey, I don't have all the answers, and I'd be very happy to speak to any of you if you have anything that you think that we could be doing differently or just be doing. Very happy to listen.
Thank you, Commissioner. Are there any further questions? Okay, Mr. Lane.
Thank you, Chair. The report gives a very clear picture of just how many projects your team, your very small team, are involved in, and that's you know, it is gratifying to see that so much progress is being made. One area that I'm going to bring up again is there doesn't appear to be a specific report on what you are doing with the Chief Constable on dealing with the 999 101 web chat and so on. Those, and I think that is something that we would like to see reported on as part of this update on an ongoing basis, and it ties in with your annual report, which says that the Commissioner continues to explore with the Chief Constable ways to improve 999 and 101 call handling. So if in future that could be included. I have looked at the new website, the new OPCC website, which is a huge improvement on what was there before, and it is certainly a lot easier to find content within that website. So that is that's a very positive improvement. And I noticed specifically actually on complaints that is now much more clearly set out in terms of who you go for what type of complaint, which I think has always been a source of confusion in the past. Two very specific comments. You refer to the BCB board papers on the 18th of May in terms of the community trigger update. I was actually interested to read that, but I discovered that that particular agenda item paper was not, it hasn't been published. It's not marked in the agenda as being restricted. So I don't know whether it's just an oversight, but just so you're aware that isn't published. I was also looking at the constabulary sustainability strategy. There are some things I noticed which I just thought might be worth commenting here. There's a comment in one of the BCB papers that says, note, some work is on the way by the combined authority, but police and fire not currently represented. That was in the context of the fleet strategy. Now, it does seem concerning to me, and I'm sure it is to you, that the combined authority would be acting on something in which clearly police and fire have an important role to play. And my final observation relates to the Southern Policing Hub, where I noticed it said that low zero carbon solutions were initially designed out in value engineering exercise in 2021. I find that pretty extraordinary that value engineering would seek to reduce the carbon reduction in something in a building which is going to be around for probably at least 50 years. So I'm pleased to see that it won't, that those will be reintroduced. So it says that and will now be reintroduced to meet Part L building regs requirements. In fact, they'd be designed to meet the emerging future building regulations, future building standards. But as I say, that I was surprised to note that they had been removed at all. Thank you.
So yeah, thank you for those. The plan, the improvement plan around 101 and Demand Hub. Well, I will tell you about it, but I think it's published because we have the BCB, the Business Litigation Board. That's my formal holding to account, and we have published it. I thought we'd circulated it to the panel before as well, but we'll take that away and we'll get back to you with that. I thank you for mentioning the website, and it's probably remiss of me to thank my team, particularly Catherine from the communication side, who's put a lot of time and effort into getting that to the place it is. I think it looks pretty good, and considering it's 1 week old or whatever now, there will be some things, a few glitches, but I think it's far more accessible than ever was, and some really good work went on there as well. I think in relation to that paper that we're missing, we'll take that away and have a look at that, and the sustainability. Jim, was it something that you wanted to say around that, or we can bring that back to you for more detail.
I can look into that one for you, but I strongly suspect it will be due to the Our fleet arrangements are done through a much broader consortium within policing because of the specialist nature. But as I say, I can certainly look into that and establish if that is the case and exactly what that combined authority work is, whether there is a link in there.
Okay, Councillor Bog.
Thank you, Chair. It was really to ask your role as Commissioner, what influence could you have on school curriculums with regards to adding elements of policing information to education, for example? So when you go through the school system, there are subjects that you cover, but some parts of British culture, i.e. policing and other authorities, it's only limited touched on. I know police visit schools, possibly, to talk about what they do. Would you have any role to add to that? So then when people come through the educational system, come as an adult, they're more informed about, I suppose, how to behave, what's expected of them, and better understanding how the police work and what the laws are.
That is a good question. What influence I have on it? So firstly, I said that I've spent a lot of time in schools. I've made that a bit of a mission at all the age levels as well, because we tend to think about our secondary schools, and that's where all the issues are. Actually, everyone's telling me that where the most probably valuable intervention would be in our primary schools, and I've heard some pretty shocking stories about, what our year 5, 6, and then going into year 7s may be up to. In addition to that, I am fairly close. I'm a school governor of one of the schools in the south of the county as well. Look, I feel for our teaching staff and our head teachers, because so much is asked of them. They're primarily their role is to educate. But then we ask them to do much more as well. And when I talked about the early intervention piece, the one commonality that all our young people have is that at some stage they will touch education. And actually in this county, I've been quite close to this, there's some quite innovative ways of trying to keep people in education, young people in, because actually we know once they're out, they're kind of lost to the system and will no doubt end up in the criminal justice system. So there's lots and lots of work going on. Well, I suppose this comes back to the value and role of police and crime commissioners. We are political, so we can lobby. We will have inroads into government in relation to school curricula, although probably not as significant as others. Certainly when we look locally, Community Safety Partnership, I will go on about those again. I funded some work around county lines, and they produced a video for young people. It was Cambridge, but it can be used anywhere. And I don't know if anyone here has seen it, but it's a fantastic educational film for young people. And it is being shown in all our schools. So that's something I've a direct influence in, because Martha's paid for it and it's going into schools. But I think it's a really tough one when you look at all the pressures on schools and what they got to do, how we actually decide what is important that we educate our children in. Interestingly, police in schools, there have been lots of academic research, and there are differing views. Where do we get best value from our police? Is it going into schools and talking to children, or something else? My personal view, we need police or those sort of people, whether it's police officers, staff, or whatever, going into schools and talking directly. And my feedback from teaching staff and head teachers, where that's happening, that's really, really positive. As long as you've got the right police officers doing, it's really, really positive. And I'm getting lots of good feedback on that.
Thank you, Commissioner. I've seen the movie and I've used it with young people, and I would thoroughly recommend it. Councillor Rodnam.
Thank you, Chair. And Commissioner, I apologise for being so very late for this meeting, but I had another meeting prior. On this matter, just one small thing, that I think there might be a typo on page 51 of the report, which and I just wanted to, I only raised it so that you can sort it out for the next time this report is presented. It's on page 51. When you're talking about putting under 5.1, putting communities first, priorities for action, and the subtitle is completed deliverables, and it says the casualty reduction officer, and I think that probably means casualty reduction officer. but it's not entirely intuitive, so I leave you to correct that. I think it's casualty reducing. But the other one I wanted to raise while we're on, and I'm on page 57, looking at the Victim and Witness Support Hub, and I know this is something that you have funded. My question is whether we can be sure that we are, or that the system is keeping in touch with victims who report an allegation, and I understand, and then as the system then takes over and it becomes a court case, and then they wish to withdraw. This is women who are victims of violence. And I understand as many as 50% of women seek to withdraw their allegation after they've made it. So this is not an uncommon situation. And we will all be aware that the circumstances in which women make allegations of abuse against somebody else are often extremely complicated. They're constrained around the implications for those women, or indeed men who are, alleging an assault or whatever. But I just wondered whether you feel we have sufficient provision at our Victim and Witness Hub to recognise the fact that women will often, in extremis, make an allegation, and it may be quite correct, but because of all the pressures that they have on them, they may seek to withdraw that allegation afterwards. And that requires an enormous amount of care and understanding of that individual. What tends to happen, I think, is once they've made the allegation, the police don't want to know about it anymore because they're just dealing with the police case. Whereas we need some support for the women or the people who've made the allegation. I'm sorry, that's a bit fuddled, but I hope you understand what I'm driving at. Whether we have support for those people there who might be seeking to withdraw an allegation, because sometimes that might need quite a lot of support.
Thank you, Councillor. It is casualty reduction. We have no one casually reducing, so thank you for pointing out, and we will get that changed. I could speak for a very long time, and I do understand the point you make absolutely entirely, having worked both as a frontline police officer and then specialise in protecting vulnerable people, including domestic abuse. And you're quite right, when we talk about victims, and many will want to be called survivors as opposed to victim, the criminal justice outcomes, that's not what this is about. Ultimately, I want bad people, convicted and sentenced, etc. But actually, this is about keeping people safe. So if anybody, a woman, and most victims of domestic abuse are women, not all, as you point out, withdraw allegations, there still needs to be a wraparound. Now, there's lots I could say because I follow this very, very closely, both with our Victims Hub, but probably more importantly, we have our IDFAs and others. But Nikki has come along today, and I know that Nikki could probably spend the next week telling about all the great work that is going on across the county and any gaps. So Nikki, is there anything you want to add in relation to support, particularly in relation to victims of domestic abuse?
Yeah, so I think it's really important to point out as well that victims can access all of our services, whether they've reported to police or not. So just because they may withdraw from a process doesn't mean that any of the support's withdrawn there and after. So they can remain with all our services for as long as they see fit and as long as they feel that it's helping. In the specific cases you're talking about, you were referring to female victims of domestic abuse. So we probably actually wouldn't see them being supported by our Victim and Witness Hub. They probably would be in one of our specialist services. So they'd be able to remain with them for as long as they saw fit as well. So if it was a high risk case, particularly with our IDFAs, so it wouldn't just be about support, it'd be about safety planning, about onward accommodation. IDFAs have access to flexible funding as well. So for example, if they've fled a household, they can help them with finding somewhere new to live, getting new clothes, some of the simple things like that. We've also got such a great third sector in Cambridgeshire. So we've got Peterborough Women's Aid, Cambridge Women's Aid, we've got Refuge operating here, we've got a county-wide outreach service, we've got some absolutely amazing new specialist posts. Here in Peterborough, we've got a new Lithuanian worker who's supporting victims, and also a county-wide specialist worker for male victims of domestic abuse as well. We've got specialist posts for minority ethnic communities. So I think we are at a stage at the moment, we've got the best support services we've ever had in the whole time that I've actually been doing this role, because we've got such significant investment. So I think, to reassure you, we've got plenty of services available who will work with people as long as they need to be supported. We've got onward group work, we've got peer support networks. There's a lot more than we've ever had.
Thank you. The point I was making is that some 50% of women want to withdraw their allegation. And of course, at that point, this is already a case in the system. And so there's sitting here, not being a woman, the victim of assault or worse, I want to say to these people, actually, don't withdraw your allegation because it happened to you, and we need to see this assailant dealt with. But of course, actually, they've got so much to lose. And so they want to withdraw the allegation and say, no, it was my mistake, I didn't mean that. And actually, that you will appreciate, it's a complex psychological situation to be in. And I just wondered whether we have, because of course, everybody who wants to support them wants to say, no, you're right, you were right, the allegation was right, don't withdraw it. And of course, they want to say, but I don't want to do that anymore. Do you see what I mean? There's a complete conflict of intention going on. And I just wanted to check that we have people who would touch base with those women again and just check that they're okay.
Yeah, our support services will do that. The model of support we offer isn't about telling anybody what to do. It's about empowering them to make their own decisions, because domestic abuse can be about power and control, and it's about giving them power back. If they did want to withdraw, our support workers will support them to do that. They will give them the facts to enable them to make their own choices. None of our services are about trying to push people into making decisions that they don't want to make.
Thank you.
Thank you, Nikki. Any further questions? Okay. So if there are no further questions, no objections, panel happy to note this report. Thank you. Report duly noted. Thank you very much. Okay, Commissioner, I would like to thank you very much for attending, you and your team. This concludes the part of the meeting you're required to attend. You're now free to leave, but before you do, could I just please say a huge thank you for arranging with the Chief Constable the visit last Friday. I think those of us that attended were really, very, very pleased to see what was going on. Certainly I feel that I understand a lot more. And just to pick up something that was in the report in terms of the volume of 999 calls, what we learned on Friday, that there were 2 days in June where that volume of calls was in excess of 800, when your expected average would read kind of 400 and something. So fully appreciate that monitoring 999 and 101 responses remains an ongoing issue. But we did say thank you on the day, but there were also a lot of constabulary staff arranged. It was a very, very informative session. Thank you.
Could I just raise one very quick point when you go on to discuss the dates of the next meeting? Because I always try and put everything in my diary so that I know that if Darryl can't attend, I can, and vice versa. And your next 3 sets of meetings are actually at the same time as the combined authority meeting, which we try and go to. Oh. And actually the November and the January one are actually in the same time and place as the combined authority meeting, which is Huntingdonshire District Council. So I'll just bring that up in case you want to look into that.
Thank you very much.
They will have been booked with Huntingdon District Council, otherwise they wouldn't be on there, so I need to check with them.
For the combined authority, but the 29th of November and the 31st of January, I've got that as a combined authority meeting at Huntingdonshire District Council.
Thank you very much for raising it. We will have a look at that. Thank you. Thank you very much. Safe journey back.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, panel members.
We still need to do
Are we
that.
still streaming? Yeah, you can carry on.
Okay, so item number 12, rules of procedure. Rules of procedure updated last year. The panel are required to review these annually. You would have had an opportunity to have a look at them within your agenda packs. Does anybody have any comment amendments that they wish to propose? So I'm taking on there's no amendments raised at this time. No changes required then. So we just accept these rules of procedures for a further year. Thank you very much. Item number 13, then administration costs and member expenses. It's an item for information. You've had the information within your packs. And that report, unless anybody has any questions, that report is just for noting.
If I may, Chair, what I noted was that the relatively few members have claimed, and yet the total claimed has been £811. And the total that was allowed wasn't much more than that. It was 870. So I just wondered, is the police and fire panel picking us not claiming their expense? I mean, I have no objection to what's there, but I just wondered, is that a realistic budget? Because the members' travel expenses, I just wondered what happens.
Isn't that
Okay, right. Okay. So we're being very fastidious.
Yes.
We prefer to be all claimed.
I've said that all along. You need to put in claims into me, not into your own authorities. So yes, do put your claims in me.
Because the budget you don't use, we don't get again.
Exactly. That's what I was thinking. If members are giving an unrealistic picture of the real costs of the panel, it's not helpful. I'm better than anybody else remembering to claim that one simply for when I was at conference. But yes, we should be claiming.
Okay, thank you. Right, in the meeting dates and venues, we may just in light of the deputy commissioner just to review those.
I'll double check. All the dates that are on there have been passed by the OPCC and are in the Commissioner's diary. So I'll speak to them tomorrow and just double check. Like the September date was changed because the Commissioner was on holiday, so it's to accommodate him. And obviously, as you can see, it's to accommodate several members of staff. So I'll double check with them, of course, and see what's going on.
Thank you.
The point is it's more like it should be that the Huntingdon District Council is the venue, isn't it? That's concern.
I'll double check that.
So I'm actually just looking at the Combined Authorities calendar. So I think he may have confused the 27th of November, which is when it is booked the civics. There is a meeting scheduled for the 29th, but that's to be confirmed. The venue is to be confirmed. And on the 31st of January, there is a meeting, but it's at Fenland.
Probably because I haven't looked already.
We'll do a bit of checking. Yeah.
Yeah, I'll double check.
Okay. And then just a reminder then about our conference on the 9th of November. You're going to send an email out just to give people some information and remind them. Okay. I think that concludes business today.
Before we conclude, can I just announce my intention to step down from the panel after the next meeting? So I will attend September meeting and step down after that. So if you'd like to put in place the recruitment process for a new co-opted member, then please start. Thank you.
Thank you, Edward. Okay, thank you very much, everybody, then, for your time and patience in putting up with my very squeaky voice. Those of you that know me well know that I'm much more robust than this ordinarily. And that brings the meeting to a close. Thank you very much. We'll see you all in September. Thank you.